Cool. Well, Jeff, I'm really excited to have you join us today. We're really excited to kind of hear a little bit about you and your story. So, Jeff, tell us a little bit about, for our listeners who are listening, who are you? Kind of what's your background? What makes Jeff Jeff?
I'm Jeff Coyle. I'm the co-founder and chief strategy officer for Market Muse. And Market Muse is an artificial intelligence content strategy platform that's focused on content quality. So my background, I will go way back. I've been in the online marketing, search engine optimization, lead gen space now for about 22 years, scary years. Went to Georgia Tech for computer science, search engine design, and usability theory. Worked for a startup called Knowledge Storm. We were the first people really selling leads to software companies, and doing so via what didn't even exist, content marketing, right? We were convincing large B2B tech companies to have content on their websites or to scan their brochures in so that we could syndicate them. I mean, literally. And that company was acquired in 2007 by our biggest competitor at the time, TechTarget. And they're a large publisher of B2B technology and some B2C technology information. I stayed on as in-house there, managed everything from paid, organic, A/B multivariate testing, conversion rate optimization, you name it. If it involved traffic going in and money coming out, it probably was the responsibility of the team. And then left in 2015. I had a brief stint in private equity, and then was added as a late co-founder to Market Muse. The funny story there is that I was one of the first customers of Market Muse because I'd been trying to figure out these problems for years as a practitioner, right? And content strategy is manual and it's miserable. And the real value is in the brains of the editorial experts and the subject matter experts. I met my co-founder who was trying to solve this one problem that took about 30 hours of manual labor. And he had already started to figure out how to solve it in about 3 or 4 minutes. And so I was like, ooh, that's pretty sweet. And then so I had walked him through possible workflows and kind of the early stage, and everything could have passed muster. It just wasn't built into software. And then when I left there, he reached out and he said, hey, I saw you left TechTarget and you're working at this PE firm. He's like, would you like to join as a late co-founder? And I was like, what's a late co-founder? And he's like, it means you're not going to get paid, you know? So basically the punchline there is it was basically taking a lot of these horrible manual workflows that make people, climb the walls. If you're an editor or you're a writer or you're a search engine optimization practitioner, and figuring out how to use artificial intelligence to both make those teams work together and be so much more efficient. And so that's been kind of my journey since 2015 with Market Muse. It's bringing those teams together and making them, actually like the work that they do and not have to do a lot of stuff manually.
So just to kind of reiterate, so no technical background. It was mostly just kind of marketing.
Oh no, my background's in computer science.
Okay. That's what I wanted to clarify.
I am I'm as nerdy as they come. I used to take apart computers and have them on my bed in 7th grade, and I was coding in assembly language, and I had businesses running on Usenet. I'm an old fart of technical, but my years at Knowledge Storm were heavily focused on product management and search engine optimization, and because of my background in search engine design and usability theory from a user interface software perspective, it really plays well as almost an information architecture, UX, as like product creator, which is what my functions were. Was always to say, to not only be the search engine optimization practitioner, but to also be able to kind of talk the talk and walk the walk from a developer perspective. I've also built ad servers on the side and sold IP. I've kind of done a lot of
that just sounds like a blast.
Weird stuff like that. And if you're an SEO, you always have side hustles, and those types of things too. I don't anymore because they just can't fit all in my brain when you're running a business that's growing at the rate that Market Muse is. You don't have much time for those types of things. But yeah, my background is definitely extremely technical. However, I always feel really good when I'm not having to flex those muscles and I can rely on people that are way better than me at it. And the lucky thing about my experience at Market Muse is that our CTO and our head of data science are, I mean, they're in the 0.1% of the top of the game, and making me feel like you know I am an old dino. I love that, honestly, because the things that they are focused on are so above the rim. That's what I hope for anytime I'm hiring somebody at those types of levels, and I'm happy to say that I have that at Market Muse. So I can hack it sometimes. I don't have to hack it every day. So.
Well, it's kind of unique because I mean, like, you're an executive with a computer science background with a lot of knowledge in marketing. Like, I would say most companies don't have that. And I would say one of the hardest bridge to gap as a software engineer who specifically, I would say I'm very like product driven, it makes those conversations easier with other people, right? Like, you're always seeing the battle like with bigger companies between what you can actually do from a technical standpoint and what marketing wants to do. Like, they're always, or a lot of the time, misaligned. And so having that skill, I'm sure, has driven like a lot of the direction of where you're going. And kind of like speak to that. Like, if you could basically give somebody who's just starting, who doesn't have that technical stuff, what would you say, like, the three things that you understand the most that has helped you carry these conversations? Like, what would you encourage founders to kind of look into?
That's a great question, and I always will say that were Market Muse not in the content strategy, content marketing, or search engine optimization space, I'd probably be a CMO, right? I wouldn't be, it wouldn't be at that company if I wasn't a founder, or because I'm really that weird subject matter expert in this thing, and then we built based on that kind of framework, right? But the things that I've learned, frankly, the hard way, which are always the best way to learn.
The best way to learn.
Someone else's heart, someone else's pain, and someone else's trials is really that as a subject matter expert, and this works in writing too, and in content, is as a subject matter expert, your likely biggest failure is not being able to get that stuff out of your brain and extract that stuff from your brain. And when you're working with developers who are classically trained software developers, or data scientists, right? It's the empathy. I mean, and I absolutely, early in my career, man, I expected the developers to just know everything and want the same things I wanted, right? And frankly, the fact that I could also review their wireframes or build wireframes, to even review code to some extent, it doesn't give you the same. You're not in their shoes. You don't know everything that they know. You don't know that. And so I think that one thing I always like to say, if you're the subject matter expert, and this is the skill of product management, basically what I'm discussing, or information architecture, it's to say really, really focus on information share, because it's highly likely that those folks have different motivations. They're measured differently than you might think they are. But also they don't know how to actually use these things. It's not part of their life to actually use the tools they build. Then that's part two. Part two is do your best to have them desire to, or even incented by, learning how to use the tools they build.
That's a super huge thing, because it's like it's super interesting, because even like everyone, when we're hiring at Strides, like, we're looking for people who really like own it and are passionate about what they're building. But it's super, like, just like you said, it's like when I'm building an app, 9 out of 10 times I'm probably not using that app on a day-to-day basis. Right. But if you can at least find people who are willing to, jump in it every once in a while, or kind of like slightly interested in it, like, that's far better than the person who's just there to just solve the problem, right? Yeah. So it's like it's kind of like that hiring thing. It's like, you're never going to find somebody as passionate as you as a founder, but if you can find somebody who's slightly interested in like the problem you're solving, or maybe it's even a pain point of theirs too, like, that definitely puts you ahead, because then you have two passionate people working towards something cool.
Yeah, totally. And we learned that the hard way, in that it wasn't an early focus. And we just realized it just created silos, and some of the things we did to bridge those. And in our case, because it's content, and where everybody can theoretically get what it does, right? It's not a dentist appointment setting software where you're just basically never going to
Yeah.
actually do that, right? So what we really
Uh-huh.
focused on was things like hackathons internally. So where we would like team
Mm.
up people, team up a couple groups and be like, hey, go use Market Muse to find what are the 2 pages that we should, across our entire site, would have the biggest impact on the business if we updated them. Go find it and then actually do it. Go update those pages and like propose this plan. We did that, build a cluster of content around, content strategy, right? And so like we actually will try to do and get everybody involved. So like the people on our team that are practitioners, the product marketing leads and the content advisory, which is our version of professional services, the guy who built the intent classifier, right, who's one of the smartest humans on this planet, getting to see, Dave, who is a professional services person, actually use his software that he created to do something is really meaningful. And we also do that with our customers. So we did a customer conference this year. We had over 1,000 people attend. Thousands of registrants, all virtual, but a portion of that was actually customers doing stuff in the platform. And what the feedback we got from our development side was, it was so cool to see people that weren't Market Muse people using the stuff, right? Because those are the types of things that I think I would stress, is try to get that early on. It's like, do you really know why you're building what you're building? Because the flip side of that is sometimes when they don't, the stuff that gets built isn't actually what the product manager needed or the customers needed. And it creates a lot of distrust and then slows everybody down. And we've been guilty of that as well. And so those are all pieces that I wish I had known that 20 years ago. I would have probably been a lot nicer to work with early in my career when I was building requirements and wondering why stuff didn't get done faster, or there was something lost in translation, or there was a corner cut, and that's what you have happen if you don't really think about the dynamic there. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, and you also talk, sorry, Austin, I was just going to say, you also talk about the why. You're building the why of the product. But a lot of times we have to understand the what are the products as well. And that's something I want to learn. Like what Market Muse is today probably wasn't what it was 5 years ago.
No.
Right. And I'm curious, I kind of want you to kind of talk about the evolution of the product. Like when you guys started, or even maybe before you there, what did the MVP look like? What did the basic product look like?
Mm-hmm.
And were you able to stay on vision, or did you guys have to pivot quite a bit? And where do you want to be? Right. Like I'm curious to see if like you're staying on track, or if things, or if the customers are telling you different things, and kind of if it's changing.
Hold on, let me recline my seat and get some pillows. No, so the
Yeah, me too.
so the original offering is the technology that we have patents on in topic modeling, which is a branch of artificial intelligence and natural language processing. It basically says, if I were an expert on a topic and I were covering that topic comprehensively, what would that look like? What are the things that I would naturally cover? And what's the collection of content look like that would be on my site to represent me as that expert? That was the core technology. That core technology can be used at the page level, the site level, the network level, for so many different applications, but that's the core. And so the original application was a different version of what you see now as Market Muse Optimize. And Market Muse Optimize is an application where you're able to analyze any topic and it will build out a visualization of that topic model. And then you can use that to update existing pages to make them more comprehensive from the lens of expertise. That was the first product. So it was really focused on that one workflow. From there, we branched out into, we always really wanted to accomplish the site level analysis, the on-demand content inventory. But that was a big, huge leap technologically. And we took 2 or 3 swings at it and couldn't maintain that infrastructure at our maturity of company. So we actually sunset the original version of site audit and content audit and we sunset them, and we were just the page level optimization. Then kind of grew, and we realized that we had to get back to that. And through our now CTO, who's a genius and is better than both of my co-founder and myself. My co-founder, by the way, built all the original software himself, not me. I was brought in as the subject matter expert. I sold the first, millions of dollars of Market Muse. I did not build the first millions of dollars of Market Muse. When Noah was brought on, Aki and I, as co-founders, pivoted completely. And Aki took on the CEO role effectively. And I focused on marketing and data science, product and engineering to take us from that kind of page level vision to an entire suite that could be used at enterprise level. That was what we built. It was called MMS, Market Muse Suite 2.0. The reason why I bring that up is we have iterated on that so significantly that it's allowed us to both have the optionality of enterprise and the optionality of PLG or self-service through product-led growth initiatives. And we last year, that's not true. End of 2019, we launched our first experiments in self-service, where our original product was $18,000 a year to buy and was enterprise onboarding. You get trained with people. We were able to launch a self-serve offering where someone could come in and buy. And then over time, that's been the heavy focus, because when you do that beautifully, it has adjacent impacts on all the customers, because you have to do great training, right? Automated. So then all your premium customers, your enterprise customers get the value of that. You have to do better user experience stuff. Well, everybody gets the value of that. And it creates both a self-service channel as well as a flywheel for enterprise. So if someone comes in, they use the software at its rudimentary form, they may work for, Cheetos, right? And then they're like, oh, cool. I could see this working for me as an enterprise user. Or if they are a one-person, agency, they also have a place. So we have customers at $79 a month, and we got customers at $500,000 a year, because the platform's so flexible. If you care about content, you need this, right?
It's so crazy to me how, I want to say, like, sciencey or mathy marketing at the end of the day is. It's like, it's really all a bunch of inputs and outputs that, I don't know, eventually hit your KPI at the end of the day. But you need so much data and information in order to make a decision like that.
Right.
And it's kind of cool. And it's funny that it's also interesting that you mentioned training, because as I talk to people or founders that come to us with a SaaS product, the very first thing I say is, you've got to have a suite full of training. The most annoying thing in the entire world is to make a purchase and have no idea how to use the product. And it's such a big mistake that founders often make. They think they can build this enterprise software and it's just going to make sense to everybody, but there's no training on it. And so I always try and hit that early, like, hey, you need to have a budget in place. You need to have the time in place to go in and build all of these recording videos, be familiar with the product. Because it's not just going to help with sales, but it's going to help with customer retention.
Oh gosh.
And so it's
our pain. You're speaking the journey we've been on over the past 3 years. We had a product that was multiple years ahead of its time. No one had ever seen anything that did what it did. And now, as because the way, if you've ever seen a product maturity or market maturity curve, right? It's the early adopters and early evangelists and super experts. They want this, and then it peaks out when the people in the know desire this, and then it goes into maturity and decline, where everyone knows they need this. So the costs go down and people get it. You don't need much training. Everybody knows how it works. We were so far early, and we thought our first enterprise platform solution, we thought it was so obvious, but it was not. And it was just a training by fire for us. The process of optimizing existing content is very mature now. Everybody gets that. So now 25 competitors flop in and copy everything. And, but the strategic lens, what should I create? What should I update? How do I implement a briefing process in my org. People are still in the middle. That's growing. That's right at the cusp now. People know they need it. They just don't know how to do it. But the optimization function is a little bit late. So like, punchline is, you're absolutely right. You always think you need less training materials. You always think you need less onboarding type materials. And I'll throw a little wrench in even what you said is a lot of people, and we included, don't understand the idea of selling to a team, right? You're typically selling to a user, or are you selling to a decision maker? The decision maker then has a team. They may not have bought it, right? And so a lot of what we see mistakes made and mistakes that we made is thinking about the buyer as always the user. And if those two things are different, it's a much more complex process. And that's where a lot of people fall down. It's they think that the users are the only people that matter. When, next month or at the end of the year, the person renewing the contract may have never used the software. You better have great reporting. You better have great, assessment of ROI, or else, you're relying on, Joe CMO to go talk to content marketing specialist, Jeff. And what if something gets lost in translation? Maybe you're not going to get that renewal. So yeah, I mean, it's not just about the user. It's a lot about the user, but it's also about the whole team. And are you delivering value or representing value at all stages? And that's where the training is really, really messed. And I see so many people fail at this. And what it does is it drives down their ability to increase price. It drives down because they can't demand a large price point. And it is dramatically impacts churn, especially if they're doing month-to-month contracts. It is a devastator, and the bad thing is it's the disease you don't see. It sneaks up on you that you're not measuring user behavior.
Yeah. Well, what's super interesting is this kind of, for whatever reason, this reminds me of like Slack in the sense of you're very enterprise focused. It sounds like you guys are pivoting to more smaller price point focused. And the reason that I think of Slack is because like a big reason that they were able to get into big companies is because they were originally doing like marketing or something, but people were starting to create like tiny little groups. I think Discord ended up winning that battle, but these people who were building these groups in Slack eventually are like, hey, we should use this as an org. And eventually like the employees are pushing for this product.
Yeah.
And so if you can bring enough value on like a one-off, so, some data analysts at this company can kind of go in and use it and kind of see it and just bring just enough value to have them start telling other team members, then like you're also putting yourself in the position to do a little bit less selling, and makes it a little bit easier to sell that bigger ticket item.
Yeah, we've whiffed on virality in our earliest designs, and it's such a fundamental of product-led growth. It's such a fundamental of product design for self-service, and that's something that we're improving on. The other fundamental is what you kind of referenced. Slack is always a great use case, which is the peak product qualified lead or product activation point. And I'm pretty sure the Slack example for PQL or product activation point, I'm just going to make it up. But I don't know the exact number, but at one point in my brain, I did know. And it was something like, has more than 7 users in an org and has spent more than, has sent more than 460 messages. Like measuring it at that level and saying, if somebody gets past, maybe the number is 5,000, right? Whatever the number is.
Yeah.
When someone gets to that, they are activated and at a level of maturity that will typically dictate a low friction sale. There's examples. So if you aren't prioritizing knowing what that is for you, oh, by the way, for us at the enterprise level, it's 3 users use the platform 4 or more times a week. If I have 3 users that use the platform, it's actually more than 3 endpoints, which doesn't mean anything to you, but different workflows. 3 users use more than 3 workflows 4 times a week or something like that I believe that's the active. What does that tell you, right? If you sell a deal to one person and don't expand to their whole team, that's a risky customer. You've got to know the things that make an activation happen. You've got to know the things that would be a risk. So let's say you had a Slack group that was a little bit dormant, right? And they have 500 users and there's only, 20 messages a month. They're never getting to activation, right? And if you think about it, it's logical when you think about it that way. They're never going to buy it. Why would they buy it? They don't use it, right? And so you've got to have that framework for yourself. What's the OpenView Ventures is like has so much. If someone's looking for other materials on this, go check out OpenView Ventures blog. It's beautiful for all these fundamentals. So. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, it's so important for like revenue reasons and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well, and the other thing too, Jeff, is like you're sitting here talking pretty casually about things like AI, enterprise. I'm an idiot. I'm not a developer myself. So when I hear these things, I think like, okay, expensive, right? Complicated, enterprise level. And that's the problem is usually these enterprise level, these different ideas and these software companies that are built usually require a ton of funding. Now, if I did some research, you guys don't have any investors, correct? It was all bootstrapped and debt finance. Is that correct?
No, that is not.
Okay. Okay.
So we are VC backed. We had what we called a rolling angel early stage where we would get angel investments to at stagger on a cap, which the capitalization or the valuation would grow over time until we felt we were comfortable raising our full institutional round, which we rose a number of years back. Led by Runway Venture, who is led by Mark Michelle, who's still on our board. He is formerly of Metamorphic Ventures. We then rose another institutional round led by Informa Ventures, which is the corporate VC wing of Informa, the huge publisher, which is always nice when you see a big publisher who we are the debt financing reference you probably have seen is that we actually also work with Riverside. And Riverside has a debt financing wing of their VC firm, and they are involved. So they extend debt, and it has various payback structures based on growth. And they're also a wonderful partner. So we've taken all of angel investment, debt, as well as VC. So we have
okay. So you have investors. That makes me like my brain, because I was looking on LinkedIn. It said that through Crunchbait you guys had done debt financing, and I was just like, that sounds so complicated. I'm really interested in that. But this makes sense. This makes a lot more sense.
Debt financing is super complicated. It's like basically,
I know.
RBF. If you want to look at revenue based financing, that's the way to look it up, because it's basically to say you pay a royalty on future earnings up to a certain point. And then you also, as part of that, you can that can be bought out. But the cool thing about fundraising is I'm so not an expert on it. My co-founder, Aki, is the world. Like he knows everything about it. And so like we're in the process of looking at raising more capital.
And you don't have to be super involved in that. It sounds like Aki's a rock star. Let's let Aki do whatever.
I am the when you need to call the subject matter expert, and he rolls in and talks about content and SEO and AI and that kind of stuff. That's why Jeff's there. Jeff's not doing that deal. I sell Market Muse as a product. I'm not selling Market Muse as a company, but that is one trick that I've learned. If you have a co-founder, if one of you can sell the vision of the company really well and the other one can sell the product, it can be a very invaluable, we call it an invaluable ham and egg sometimes.
Yeah. Well, and here's the deal. I'm really kind of curious, Jeff, and maybe you weren't there because it was Charles. He was the founder, correct?
No, Aki Balog and
it was you and Aki.
We're the co-founders.
That's right.
We're the co-founders. Chuck was brought in as our first executive in charge of sales.
Okay.
And so he was brought in sales, and then he expanded to chief revenue officer. And then the end of last year, he earned the promotion to CEO, which allowed my co-founder Aki to transition his role to be president. He works for he works on special projects as well as supports fundraising.
Fundraising.
And then I pulled myself out of the org, and I'm focused on, as a chief strategy officer, I'm focused on our brand new stuff that isn't even out yet, plus
Yep.
horizon scanning, looking at the competitive landscape and driving the overall company direction. But you know what that really means? It means I get brought in on lots of stuff. Like,
Yeah, I was
I
going to
got to
say a
figure out.
little bit of
I got to
everything.
figure out better boundaries there for certain things. But I love all aspects of it. So it gets, so I'll be helping a customer, selling a deal, working on a, partnership. So it really, for me, it's kind of like whoever needs me, I'm here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and we're going to get into the team and how you guys found your team and what you were looking for in those teams, and honestly some of the complexities that your specific business has. But I'm really curious because Aki originally built this by himself, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he
And
built it.
I
Yeah.
I would say a lot of our founders and our listeners that are here very early on, how did Aki take it from, hey, this is a cool idea, to like, hey, this is something that's actually fundable, like I'm interested in it? Did he happen to know people? Were you guys post revenue before you guys got any type of funding, angel rounds, or kind of what was that story like? And it might be even predate you.
No, no, no.
But
I mean, I know it all, but
yeah,
it does. Well, the punchline is it does predate me. Um,
yeah,
and Aki tells his story better, but the quick reference is he worked for OpenView Ventures.
hmm
He sourced amazing deals for them. He got the bug. He knew he wanted to build something. His advisors there told him he needed some practical experience. So he went and ran content marketing for a database company to just get his stripes. And then he decided, kind of as a science experiment and nights and weekends in his house, started coding what became Market Muse, the beginnings of. We had a third co-founder who was more of a scientific advisor early on. Never was a full-time employee. He's still no references or early co-founder. And then he had a few early evangelists, but had just basically scraped together cash himself. When I first met him, I had built some really poorly designed technology in the same area. And I had always been seeking out someone who was trying to solve this problem. And I actually contacted him and to test it out. And I did, as when I was at Tech Target. So basically, when he reached out, he had not raised a tremendous amount of seed at the time. And the first time I walked into his house, first I slept in his apartment, which was a sublet, when I went to go visit him. And when I looked at the financials, which he was very transparent. Aki's the most transparent human. He's an amazing human. When I looked at the financials, my brain almost exploded. To have built what he had built already on the amount of money that he had spent was shocking. It was shockingly
like shocking in a good way, or
shockingly frugal. It was
wow,
he was so frugal. It blew my mind. I didn't even think and he had a few advisors in Boston that had given him some amazing advice. And the punchline there, that weekend, we secured our first significant seed. I attended the meeting like the next day, and we went in, pitched to 3 angel investors who all 3 gave us a check. And that was our first significant angel investment. And we're still connected to those 3 guys.
that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, meaningful revenue that first quarter. We signed our first $60,000 customer annual. Went from, gosh, it was probably around $1,000 MRR to off to the races. 20, 30 in that first
Wow.
stretch, and never looked back. Obviously, we've had ups and downs. I mean, we all had the reason why your bar is finished, is a down for we were talking about COVID, but we've all been ups and downs through this, and you learn a lot. But for us, you asked earlier about pivoting. Yeah, we're always pivoting. We're building new things. We made an acquisition last year of a big data provider, which we're going to be rolling out into another product. We're always trying to figure out where to apply the resources, and making 9 mistakes for every one good
Yeah, that's the smart way. I feel, well, like that's the only way to do it. I would say that's one of like my big pet peeves, just in general, is people wait a long time to make a decision, and I feel like at the end of the day, you're better off just trying it and watching it burn than you are to work really hard to end up ultimately probably making the wrong decision anyways. So it's just it's just business. It's just a matter of testing, testing, trying, and trying. And I kind of want to pivot to kind of like that story of building your team. Like, you guys just raised a round, you got angel investment. The first people you hire is important. And I kind of want to explain to, the people listening, like how much energy they should actually put into recruiting like a technical person to come in and build their product, or to continue working on an existing product that's already there. So what are some key characteristics you're looking for in an engineer? And I'm guessing you'll have a unique take too, because you have a computer science background. So
This is such a great question. And we were very unorthodox early on. We didn't have a first W-2 employee for a long time. Lots of contractors, lots of well-wishers. And I learned a lot from that time. It's that, being able to gauge if someone's really on the bus is very important. What their motivations are, especially early stage, are really, really key. I mean, we had some people who, were being paid so far under market value. And really I would say until we had the ability, like some resources and, as far as funding, it was a hodgepodge of lots of different contributors doing a lot of different things. And that was always tough. When we first really, I think, cracked the code was biting the bullet and saying, whenever we're looking for somebody, we've got to hire somebody better than us at the thing that they're responsible for. And we've got to really take stock. And one thing we didn't do very well was we held on to some people who had passed, they weren't better than us, right? They weren't innovators. They had overstayed their welcome, but we felt a lot of loyalty to them because maybe they were there early on. And, those are lessons that are so hard to learn when someone just, stays around for an extra year than they should have, because the damage done during that last year is where they're like fizzling out or they've lost the love, especially with an early stage startup. It's really hard. And I lost a lot of sleep about it, my personal, where, gosh, it broke my heart to have to end up leaving. But I now wish it had happened a year before. And I think that's also, you always got to take stock and see like who's a B player who's still on the team, and they're there because you kind of think you owe it to them. But the biggest hires for us are some of the people we mentioned. Chuck, leveling up our sales. He comes from Gartner, Rosetta Stone, and Acrolinx. Has significant more experience. Our now VP of Marketing, Elizabeth Irvine, who we hired, who I worked with previously, who was someone I always wanted to hire because she's so good at so many things. Our CTO, Noah, who, my wife always says that was the day when you hired Noah that it changed, because he took the burden of technology off of Aki so that Aki could be a real founder and be focused on the business. He listens and he's so thoughtful, listening to me and, subject matter expert product guy, and also our data science lead, who it's a fun story how he showed up, but someone who, just a thought leader in the space. So the key is either you're hiring out of necessity to get jobs done, or you should be hiring people better than you. That's it.
yeah, because I was gonna say, it sounds like your big indicator when you really started hiring was, yeah, one, find people better than you, but two, it sounded like people who like were for sure bought into like the vision and the direction of where people were going. Like, those were kind of like your key indicators
Yeah.
as to whether or not you made a hire.
Yeah, absolutely.
Less about
Absolutely.
less about the financials and what they were paying, but more of like, hey, I see where the vision's going, and maybe even contributing some input on some potential features or direction for your product that you may not have thought about too.
Yeah, I think the nature of our business and that it is relative, was an early startup. You make sure people know, like, we're not a publicly facing, profitable organization early on, right? We're building this from scratch. It's, you're not going to get paid market. And being very blunt with that, like it takes in our space in content and in search, CRO and whatever. There's a lot of mercenaries, I call them. They're for hire, but their market rate is very high, and they're not in it for the business. They're in it to make money. That's what mercenaries do. And we were blinded by hiring a few of those people as contractors here and there. But I always tell folks, like, you got to question motivation. First of all, you're going to pay too much for the stage you're at. It's much better to be upfront and say, hey, we pay way below market rate. It's an awesome place to work. We're building something no one else has built. It's really hard. It's going to suck. We're going to ask you to do way too much stuff. Are you still in? and the people that stick around tend to be awesome. But you just got to be upfront.
Being upfront with them, make them kind of see kind of like what the path is going to be going forward, and kind of go along with that, and kind of shifting gears a little bit. I'm curious on the time where you made a really bad decision, because as weird as that is, that resonates with our listeners, is like a mistake that you made. And what was one of those kind of big mistakes you made, and like what did you do to kind of overcome that? How did it affect the company?
Oh my gosh.
He's like, which one?
We made so many mistakes. It's like I make mistakes every day. And I'm fairly certain that a mistake will be made before now and the end of the day, and it's 3 p.m. A significant one. I mean, a significant one. I'll give you a couple. Not focusing on retention. Not focusing on product user data.
Not doing that, like you didn't focus on retention?
No, we didn't focus on retention because we didn't have enough customers such that through human energy, we couldn't solve every problem. So when customers had problems, we knew how to solve them. So we just solved them. And so we had artificially high retention, because then when you scale, those projects, those efforts aren't systematized. And so building a great customer success team or account management team is always and should be in parallel with truly understanding product usage data. That was one that was certainly, we learned that a year probably too late. We probably learned that needed to be a focus in 2018, and it should have been in 2017.
I just think of like the process of a lot of the apps that like we have worked on, or a lot of the different SaaS products or whatever. And it's interesting because it's traditionally things like analytics, like user, like how their segments and like stuff like that, retention, and marketing. Those are all the things that get put on the back burner until the product's finished.
Right.
But when you get to like this scaling point and you don't have that, you end up starting to make a lot of bad plays, or you're really just having to backtrack a lot. Because I mean, that's stuff that just takes time. Like you don't just go and build a user segment and it's right. Like kind of, especially just fundamentally, like you're testing and doing a lot of different things. And so that's interesting that you bring that up. And I've got like a follow-up question with that. Like, what do you think the most challenging piece to building like, or really scaling a SaaS company is? Because I'm guessing those two are probably pretty similar.
So we did it backwards. So the question's harder for me than anyone, right? So if you're a product-led growth company, you're starting at the end user. You're getting critical mass through things like freemium trial or through a self-serve offering. You're learning, and then you're trying to move up market. The amount of money burned going up market is typically how SaaS companies fail, because they can't figure out how to go up market. We started up market, right? So we have a solution that works for big businesses and allows them to crush it, right? We have to continuously improve this. How do you scale that without people? It's real hard, right? And so for us, we've got to figure out ultra efficiency up here. And the way that we're scaling efficiency up here is through going back to the traditional starting point, which would be product led, which would be things like freemium and trial, like self-service offerings, which force you to build great onboarding experiences, great training experiences, etc. With our hopes are that continuing that path will do two things. One, create a great revenue stream at the self-service level. But two, the most important is what we call the flywheel. The flywheel is people who are using the trial or self-serve, trial, freemium, or paid at the user level will zoom flywheel into a faster enterprise sale. So what's that mean? I want, I'm looking around the room. I want Blue Yet, who makes the Yeti, right? I want Blue microphones. I want their content marketing lead to come in, use Market Muse. Maybe they pay $100 a month. They love it. They're like, oh wow, yeah, we do need this for the whole team. Boom, they're a $2,000 a month customer because they just added their entire team, right? I wish I had made that happen a lot sooner. That opportunity identification flywheel. So for enterprise, the key is if you don't do that, you have to do that with linear expansion. You can't do it with a scalable function. But if you can do it with freemium and self-serve, that flywheel can allow you to scale enterprise exponentially, just like you can scale self-serve. And that's really that's literally the challenge I'm going through right now. And we're hitting it. It's just, that's the secret, right? Very few companies successfully do both things. And that's why you see a lot of SaaS products at a low price point get critical mass, try to expand, crash and burn, and then the critical mass dies. It's because they don't know how to do that phase two. We just started. We started at phase two, and then we're building phase one, and then phase zero. And in our case, the funny part about that is we watched about 30 competitors in the self-serve enter the space during that whole process. So that's been. Yeah. It's been a journey, but we've been at the top of the mountain for a long time, and so it's only natural that there's a lot of people with lots of ammunition.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. And kind of in closing, like I'm just curious on like, considering our listeners who are very early on in kind of that, what like piece of advice do you feel like these early founders should know? And something maybe you wish you would have known kind of in the beginning, whether it's, enterprise SaaS, just regular entrepreneur, like what are your thoughts and advice would you give to our listeners?
To the people who are pre-revenue.
Yeah, I'd say pre-revenue. Yeah.
Pre-revenue, I would try to get all the truly distinct, unique value and knowledge that you possess out of your brain and be able to communicate how that connects to the value that you are planning to create, and separately understand where in the product maturity curve your solution is. If you're fighting in the red ocean, it's going to be hard. If you're fighting early, like we were, plan on 7 years at least, because the world doesn't move fast. But know the answer, the answer that you're delivering, and also know what types of skills you miss. In our case, we've never paid for traffic or leads because we're really good at content marketing, which you'd expect us to be, right?
Yeah.
And so we eat our own dog food, and but if we didn't, we could have never existed. We could have never been able to budget to buy leads. We get thousands and thousands of leads a month naturally, and then the earliest versions of Market Muse, we sucked at converting those. But know where you stink. If you aren't good at that, you're gonna have to pay for it. If you don't have a big network already in the space that you're going to be operating, that's going to be a herder. You're going to be hurt. You're going to have to find somebody that does. If you don't have a reputation in the space. And if you haven't gotten, and you try to connect something that only you know, or that you are special to the thing you build, or the thing that your team builds to provide some uniqueness, especially if it's in the product maturity curve where there's competitors doing the same thing or they're having the same impact with a different product, which are two different things. So like the fact that your solution gets pizza at my house in 20 minutes, what makes Postmates different than Grubhub, different than DoorDash, different than Uber Eats, different than me calling the store, right? Like why are those things different businesses? What makes them special? It's a red ocean in there, right? If you're really doing something special, the blue ocean, make it, and don't do it based on personal branding. Oh my God. Yeah, you might want to get started, but get yourself out of it. I mean, I'm the face of Market Muse, but if I were to go away, Market Muse would still be great. It's not called jeffcoyle.com. It's not called akiblog.com. Those are things that can create risks for your business, can make you less attractive for investors. And it's not about you. That's my best piece of advice. Any company, it isn't about you.
Yeah, and to kind of like recap that makes a lot of sense. Mainly the piece that you kind of threw in there at the beginning, just around really brain dumping. That's something that I think every founder struggles
Yeah.
to do. And even myself, like I struggle with that all the time. Like I'll jump in meetings and I just forget that people don't have context. Right.
Yeah.
And that's super hard. So whether you're explaining that so really two things: share as much information as you can with the people who are bringing onto your team. And really the second thing is find people who complement your weaknesses, right?
Oh, yeah.
So if you can do those two things, like you're in a really good spot to go somewhere. At that point, it's just really all about execution.
Yeah.
So to end this here, where can our listeners find you?
Jeffrey_Coyle on Twitter. You could DM me, tweet at me, whatever. Jeff@marketmuse.com. Go check out, if you're interested at all with content strategy, go check out Content Strategy Crash Course on our blog. Read the whole blog. It's written by some of the most amazing people. I do a content strategy webinar series, usually twice a month. We've got kind of backup archives from anyone you'd ever want to hear from. If you have any questions, I know we have active offer with you all, but also there's typically ones on the site. So go check out our trial and shoot us some feedback. We have a Slack community called the Content Strategy Collective, which has over 1,500 of the most elite content strategists and SEOs in the world who contribute, answer questions. I mean, you can pop a question in there about anything and you're going to get responses from, some of the most elite content strategists in the world. It's quite a luxury. So check that out.
Yeah, that sounds super awesome.
Shoot me a note if you want that intro and go from there.
Perfect.
Cool.
Thanks so much, Jeff, for jumping on with us.
Yeah.
Super pumped to
Thanks,
do
Jeff.
this show with you.